for the glove compartment and the trunk lid of Ford cars.
Okay. So where was that at?
Detroit, Michigan.
Okay. But that where did you learn about printing in Did you learn about printing in Illinois?
Yeah, well, that was one of my steps to getting to Illinois.
Okay.
And my after I had quit my job at the chemical plant, I went to Detroit. I was just looking for a job. I didn't care what it was at that time because I wasn't in printing. But when I got to Detroit, I worked at Carrick Products making these hinges. I was there for probably 3 to 4 months, and I talked to my I think she was my niece who married this guy by the name of Beer. And they had a print shop in Calumet City. And I wanted to get out of the place I was working, making these parts, because there was no future in it. And he said that he'd give me a job at $1 an hour working for him and room and board at his house. And I said, I'll take it. And so I went. And until November of 1950, I worked with him for about 6 months. I was taught to run a Davidson press, which was different from anything else I'd run before because it was a one-cylinder press that had two segments on it. One was impression and one was image. And when they went around, they swapped. They would print it on a blanket, and then the blanket would print it on the paper, and it would go off. You ran one, didn't you?
Yes, we had a Davidson 500. That's why I'm looking at you and saying, I think I know what you're talking about. We had one, yes.
Yeah, I thought you did. So Morgantown Printing and Binding had one at one time.
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't there then. Anyway, that's the press I was running. And these segments on this one cylinder were, you had to adjust and line up. And you had little Allen wrenches that you had to tighten the set screws with to hold them in place and register. Well, on this particular press, the holes that was in there that you put the Allen wrench in to tighten up were wore out. And sometimes if you didn't happen to get it right and tight, it would slip while he was running.
Oh.
And it made me mad and frustrated. And for a period of about 2 weeks, I kept telling my Eldon the problem I was having down there, because he would yell down over the bitch box, because he was upstairs, I was downstairs. He'd say, I don't hear the press running. I said, no, it slipped again. Well, I got mad and told him, I said, if you don't get some damn new screws, I'm not going to run the press.
Yeah.
Well, he says, you get over and run the press or you can quit. I said, well, I quit. And I left.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I got frustrated with the Davidson a few times too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
one time you know, they have those in a printing press. They have a wooden gear, so that if it gets jammed up, it
breaks the gear.
Breaks the wooden gear, so that it doesn't
screw up the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happened a couple of times on that Davidson, and man, I was mad because that was hard to change. Yeah, that on that Davidson 500, I believe we had,
Yeah.
was a model.
I don't know what one we had. It was old, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it was a different kind of press, I'll tell you that. So then, where did you start working?
Okay, when I left Calumet City, I quit and joined the Navy.
Oh, okay. So we want to jump forward to after let's see. 1977 Fairmont Printing, Yates Printing, Joseph Genstein, Alling and Corey, Graphics Printing and Advertising. You talked about the Aerographics Printing and Advertising in Westover.
Yeah, that's after I sold it.
Yes. Sold it to Bill Christopher.
Right.
Okay. That was in 1985 because you'd been
Yeah.
in
I'd been there 10 years.
yeah. And then you finished your career from 86 to 87 at Fairmont Printing.
I didn't really finish. That's when I stopped on my resume.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
I don't have anything on there about working for the university again, do I?
No.
Okay.
No. So you did a few things in retirement, sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when I sold my shop
Uh-huh.
to Christopher in '85, that was my retirement right there.
Okay. Okay.
As far as having to get out and work and push for a living,
Yeah.
because my family was gone,
Yeah.
and it was just the wife and I, and she still worked. So I was looking for something to do, and there was a job advertised for ag extension at the university. They wanted someone to operate and prepare operate computer equipment to set up brochures, booklets, and so forth to get printed about agriculture.
Okay.
And that was down in Knapp Hall.
Oh.
And at that time, Jack Johns was working there.
Okay.
That's how I met him. And his office was right down from mine. Oh, I didn't know a thing about operating a computer. So I went in and I learned how to operate it. And then I started to be able to type, because I didn't know how to type, and set up in cold type on the computer and print it out and make up things along with pictures, layout, and everything, preparing it to be printed. But I didn't do any printing. All I did was make the preparation and design and layout and all that.
See, you did the same thing that my dad did at the end of his career. He learned the Macintosh computer and he started doing layout, and that freed me up from cutting and pasting, and when the Macintosh computer came out in 1985. And that freed me up to print more, because my dad learned the computer like yourself. He grabbed the bull by the horns and he learned computer and started doing all the layout that I used to have to cut and paste. And then I took over from Dad in 1989 when he retired. But let's talk about some of the old printers. Mention some of the old names that you remember, like the Ludwigs and Mr. Everly. And some of the locations of some of the print shops around town.
Well, the time that I went to work at Morgantown Printing and Binding as a general manager was an experience period for a person who had an education and wanted to learn. It actually gave me hands-on time to actually be involved with what was going on, not just supervising. But that was my main thing, keeping the work going into the people to do it. And I was the chief or head of doing all the proofing of the things we were going to print that were not standing forms. And the people that worked there, one of which was Mr. Ludwig. He was the foreman and supervisor of the typography section, and he had a couple people working for him that worked with him, not for him, that run the linotype and could run the Ludlow and do hand set and make up the forms in the chase that they was going to put on the printing presses to print. And one of those people was there was two of them. I can't think of the name right offhand.
Well, wasn't the Ludlow family owned Acme Printing at the turn of the century?
The Ludlow family, I think, was involved in Acme Printing, but I have no knowledge of.
I've done some research, and the Ludwig family did own Acme Printing.
That was Bill Ludwig, yeah.
Bill Ludwig, yes. And then it turned into Morgantown Printing and Binding. What were the locations of Morgantown Printing and Binding?
Well, there behind the post office is the only place I knew it.
Okay, well, I had heard that Acme Printing was possibly down on Front Street, but it used to be University. It's University Avenue now, but Front Street.
Yeah.
Where the Davidson building was?
Okay.
Or State Electronics up on Chestnut Street.
Right.
Yes. And then there was
I don't know any of that.
Okay. Did you know about the print shop on Chestnut Street and Fayette Street, which was DeBerry's?
Newberry?
DeBerry.
DeBerry.
Mr. DeBerry.
Oh yeah, I'm John DeBerry.
Yeah.
I worked for him.
Okay. Yeah,
That was on Chestnut Street up in the house.
Yes. And what were some of the other locations of
Well, he did printing, but his main business was Morgantown Blueprint.
Oh, okay. Okay.
His business started out as a blueprint business. That's basically what he did.
I see.
And he gradually grew into printing because there was a need for it. He bought a monolith, and I went in to work for him running that monolith for a while.
How about some of the other print shops? There was Brake Iron. You mentioned the Brake Iron.
Right. That was out on Chestnut Street in the basement of the building at the corner of where the courthouse is.
Prairie and Chestnut?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to walk by there as when I was playing basketball and stuff. I would go to practice. I used to peek down in there and see those people. I'd be at Morgantown Printing and Binding where my dad was, and I'd walk up the alley and I'd see them in there printing too. Mm-hmm. Back in the 60s, 1960s.
Yeah.
And
well, that was probably his son because his dad died.
Oh, okay. And
I think it was Dave Breakarn was his name.
Okay. Now I've heard of a printer called Mr. Flowers.
Flowers?
Yes.
Yes. I think that was the printer that I was told you about that was over on Park Avenue. he had a print shop in the basement of his house.
Well, that was Harold Law.
No, no, no.
No?
No.
No?
No.
On Park Street in Westover? Is that right?
No, on Park Street from over a high school, Morgantown
Oh.
High.
So that's where he was at, Mr. Flowers, for a while. And,
Well, he lived there.
okay,
That was his house there.
I see.
And he had this print shop in the basement.
Okay.
And he did this printing. He did handset. He didn't have everything he did was handset.
Let's see, and what was his name again?
Flowers.
Flowers, okay. Now, he must have been several locations from some of my research I'm trying to find out.
I don't know. That's the only place I know him from.
Because I rescued an old hand paper cutter from a place in Westover, and that guy's name was Flowers. He moved over to Westover somehow.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe I got the names wrong. Maybe that guy's name wasn't Flowers.
The one on Park Street?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what this whole documentary and everything's about, is getting everybody in their place. I'm going through city directories and
Yeah.
finding locations and names of printers, but there was somebody up on Monongalia Avenue too. There was a place on Fayette Street, or no, Walnut Street and Chestnut Street at long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 115 Walnut Street. I think his name was Hunt, but I'm not sure.
No, I don't know if any of that there's probably
Yeah.
before our time.
Yeah, it was. It was. I've got pictures of it, but I don't know what corner it was. It just says, I think 115 Fayette Street. But I also know that Morgantown Dominion Post or Morgantown Post was printed on Spruce Street, right?
Yes.
And they also printed a newspaper on Pleasant Street. I've heard that too. They had a location on Pleasant Street. I've looked in city directories.
Okay. The place they had on Pleasant Street was up there at the corner, near the corner of High Street and Pleasant Street. It was on Pleasant Street, but it was up from the corner on High Street. Warren Perry Pharmacy, you know where it was?
Yeah.
Okay, this was across the street from Warren Perry Pharmacy,
Okay.
in the middle of the block, between there and Spruce.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
okay, there was
That's
a
what I've
building.
been trying to find out. Thank you.
Okay, there was a building there that had an office right off the street, but you had to go downstairs where they had the equipment, the cameras and so forth, to make the cuts, which at that time was somewhere around an 85 to 100 dot printing dot on photographs that they could make etch into the cut to print the picture in reverse. Then they took those over to the newspaper, which the press was located over about a block back or half a block back from Spruce Street where the building was.
Yeah.
There was another alley back there that went into the printing place.
They renamed that the Dale Miller Building here recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, they people that was working in there making those cuts, when the paper went offset, of course they went out of business. But they would take those cuts over, and then over in the plant they set the type and laid out the paper. They would take those cuts and they put the type down and they made this mat. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay.
remember that.
Have you ever seen a newspaper mat from letterpress?
No, I haven't. We have 6 seconds.
Okay,
So remember that. Okay, we're done for today.
okay. Now, just to let you know where we can start out, they had a material that was about, I would say, a 1/16 of an inch thick, that was made out of a special mix of paper fibers, and it was, I think, wet down. It was not soaking wet, but it was moist, and it was soft. It was very pliable. I mean, exceptionally pliable, because they would take the page, like in the newspaper, the whole page, have it laid out. They had this piece of material that they would put over top of it. And I don't know how they did it, if they did it with a pressure press, which I think they did. I don't think at that time they used vacuum, because it was too open. But they would press that material down on top of the type, and it would make an image of that type, and the pictures, whatever they were, whatever the cuts were, what was there, would go into that material. Then they would take that piece of material and it would bend, and they would put it in this cylinder, and it would be the basis. Then they would pour this hot metal in there, and they would cast what they pressed into that paper onto a cylinder, and they put that on the press, and that's what they printed from.
Huh. Never heard of that.
You learned something today.
Yeah. I learned.
Well, you know those presses that printed, cylinder presses they had, letterpress, that printed the newspaper, were all cylinder presses. And they had to make these cylinders out of the type and print it on the paper. They printed directly on the paper.
Oh man.
Off of those cylinders. And they got inked up with rollers, and there was an impression cylinder which the paper was against, that pressed up against that cylinder when they printed. You know that the paper they printed on the paper came off of a roll.
Huh.
They didn't print on a sheet.
Oh, came off of a roll, yeah.
They printed newspapers off of a roll of paper.
Yeah.
The paper was, they would start it up. They'd put these cylinders on, and they were all registered in and timed out. So this paper went through, and it got printed on both sides and come off the other end, folded and trimmed.
Oh, geez.
And stacked.
Wow.
You never saw that.
I seen it, a modern day version.
Yeah.
Over
Offset, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically the same thing, but the presses then were all letterpress.
Wow.
That's an aspect that,
Yeah.
that's a whole story in itself.
Oh yeah, it'd have to be.